Hola, soy Leslie Foster de Common Ground International, and we have been running immersion programs in Central America since the early 2000s. And my husband and I, when I say we, it's my husband and I, and we are teachers by training. We love to teach, it's our passion, and we take teaching to the extreme on immersion programs. We have learned a lot in establishing our immersion programs in Central America, especially in terms of doing outreach. And so I want to talk for a second about our objectives of incorporating outreach work into our language immersion programs, why we do it, how we do it, and our guiding principles for doing it. So you might have heard the terms short-term mission work or volunteerism, and there are definitely great things that come out of those projects and opportunities, and there are some very negative things as well. So I'm going to touch on those as well. But the objective of our volunteer work, when we're talking about language development, the whole purpose of our immersion programs is to give you the Spanish language tools that you need in order to have a greater impact in your community. Whether you are a healthcare provider, a real estate agent, a teacher, or a high school student, how can you use your Spanish in your realms in the U.S. to serve your clients, your patients, your community better? So the objective of our volunteer work is very much tied into the language acquisition piece. It's a very valuable piece to also learning about the culture, the ins and outs of the culture, and we believe it is a great way to be able to open your eyes to the cultures that you might be rubbing shoulders with in the U.S. and how to adjust your behaviors or mannerisms of treating those cultures in the U.S. So it serves as a practicum and the application, the practical application piece of your Spanish that you're learning in the classroom, but within your context, whether that's education or medicine. It's an opportunity to practice Spanish in real life engagements, on the spot, on the fly, without notes in front of you, and in oftentimes realistic situations where there's a lot of background noise or cars honking on the street or schedules change. And these are realities of your job and your job using Spanish in your real life situations. Another objective of the volunteer work is it is a great step to reaching higher levels of Spanish proficiency and cultural competency. So it's a really great piece to the whole language immersion. Now we do have some guiding principles that we have adjusted throughout the years and we've learned through trial and error. But we want to make sure in whatever outreach that we're doing that we're actually meeting a real need. There's a true need in the community and we are there to make a difference and not be an extra burden to the organization that we're working with or to the community. We don't want to create more work in the end just to make us feel better about helping. The second guiding principle that's really important for us is we need to make sure that our projects are sustainable. Sustainable is a hot word, a buzzword that is used in a variety of contexts, from talking about ecology and building and to green projects, and we're talking about the sustainability of the projects and the communities that we're working in. So the project is not dependent on us being in the country at that time. There are long-term plans and locals running a much bigger project than we are involved in. We're just adding a little boost to what they currently have going on. Number three, it needs to be ethical. We will not work outside our scope. We will not build buildings because we're not contractors. We're not going to be pouring concrete because that's not what we're there to do. We're not going to be building bridges because we're not architects and know that design work, but we are teachers, we are healthcare workers, and our groups have different roles and different professions, and they will be working within their expertise. And within what the host culture allows them to do without taking the job of what a local is already there doing. That's important as well. And then the fourth guiding principle is these projects need to be language rich, meaning that in order to get the work done, there is a exchange in language and with people. We are not there to pick up trash or build buildings. Those are great things, but there's not a lot of opportunity to use Spanish in those contexts. So participants will be there to use Spanish in order to get the project done. Now, these guiding principles really came out of these two concepts, relief versus development, and two books that, besides all our experience of over a decade and a half of doing outreach projects and working with local nonprofits, NGOs, missionaries in Central America, two fantastic books that we have heard over and over and over in working with these organizations, and then reading ourselves, are Toxic Charity and When Helping Hurts. And these books really talk about the difference between relief and development. So what is the difference? Have you ever thought about the difference? So relief does for others. You can think about that. These are kind of my Cliff Note versions. Relief does things for others. Development takes the long view and enables others to do for themselves. So development is a very long-term plan. There's a lot of teaching, discipling, mentoring, training, doing, and then actually executing or carrying out the project. Development takes a long time. Relief, a good example of relief is during, the hurricane season and people are displaced from their homes. They need Red Cross right there and people to donate food and water and meals until they can get back up on their feet. That's a good example of relief. The problem is when people confuse relief for development and just focus on relief over a long period of time. Then it creates problems of dependence and takes away independence from others. And we're going to talk about that. Relief improves conditions, but development strengthens capacities. It trains people to improve their own conditions over time. It gives them the abilities and the capacities to do so. It's the concept you have probably all heard. Relief gives a fish, development teaches someone to fish. So relief is very short term. It is definitely awesome, great work, but there is a time for relief and there is a time for development. Relief also treats the symptom and development addresses the root cause. So when you think about these two things in the context of Nicaragua, for example, which is one of the poorest countries in Central South America, there are a lot of development issues and a lot of programs for development that are actually happening, and they are fantastic. But as a tourist that goes down there and sees the beggar on the streets, some gut intuition is to give them food right away. Well, we don't know the background of that person. We don't know if it's part of a scamming ring, that they're actually using that food to sell, and we just don't know. And so it's really important to get connected with, when you travel abroad and you want to participate in outreach opportunities, to get connected with people that are local and that are there for the long haul and are currently involved in projects that focus on development and not just relief. So once we, as an organization, Common Ground National, started seeing how people abroad focus their outreach on both relief and development, as we started experiencing, and a lot through trial and error, we developed some guidelines for our outreach projects that are based on these principles of toxic charity and when helping hurts. One is never do for the poor what they have or could have the capacity to do for themselves. We don't want to take away an opportunity that they could have had to improve their situation just because we were there. There's a great example in the book Toxic Charity that talks about the story of two wells. And one is very much a story of empowering a community, an entire community, and one is a story of creating dependency. They both started with the same need, that both these communities did not have water in order to they would have to walk miles and miles for fresh water, for drinking water and cooking purposes and cleaning and all that kind of stuff. And so through volunteers that came and saw these communities and got plugged in, they were struck by how both these communities could change so much if they just had access to water and to a well. And so one local organization accepted the help from a U.S. Organization to build them a well. And so this well was built within the community, and there was a big opening celebration, and everyone, the entire community, was so grateful and so excited to have fresh water. But you know what happened is the well pump broke, and because this U.S. organization brought U.S. people in to build the well and dig the well and get all the infrastructure set up. When the well pump broke, the locals did not know how to fix it, but they also didn't say anything because they felt like it might have been their fault. And so they went back to their old ways. Well, this organization kept coming back and fixing it and getting so frustrated because they kept fixing it and wondering why the local people weren't doing anything about it. So that's one story. The other story, and these are both true, is same needs, a well. There were plans for a well to be built in another community. However, this foreign aid organization, and I can't remember at this moment if it was a missionary or I'm not quite sure, but they found locals within the community that had the skills and the abilities to dig a well and build a well and got the whole community involved. And so when it broke, they knew how to fix it. And as a result, because they had skin in the game, they were that much more invested, and their community flourished in significant other ways because there's the whole point of this local nonprofit empowered them by giving them the tools to build a well. So I did not do a very good job at explaining the story of the two wells, but it is very well laid out in the book Toxic Charity. And honestly, we see stark comparisons when we are in Central America of projects like this, where you see one that creates empowerment and one that creates dependency. You see that all the time. Also, another guideline, besides never doing for the poor what they could have done for themselves or they can do for themselves, is number 2, limit one-way giving to emergencies. So when there is a hurricane or a natural disaster or a political uprising and people are getting hurt, absolutely, that is the time to give money. Even if you don't have the time to invest, that is the time to give resources when it is an emergency. That is the whole relief part. There's a good example, again, of what started with tamales, ended up as a food pantry. And through a long series of events, this again created more dependency. What started out as relief continued to be relief through the long haul and did not make that pivot to a dependent or to a development structure. And then number 3, empower through employment, lending, investing, and use grants sparingly, because really anytime money is gifted, there is a loss of intrinsic value of work. So there are really great micro-lending organizations out there that we're involved with that teach the people about financial responsibility, financial literacy, and hold them accountable as well. So that is the importance of giving through employment and lending and investing. And just a few more here. Number 4 is very important as well, but your self-interest need to come after the realities, the real needs of the people. So it's a reality that short-term missions or helping work feels good and changes you as a person. And oftentimes that is good enough for many people, that it just felt good to help. But the giver's development must be secondary to the receiver's needs. So one thing that we do at Common Ground is we always approach our organizations and say, we have a group of teachers that are coming in about 4 months. Do you have any projects that are going on in any educational centers that you could use some additional hands or help with? And instead of, we don't want our organizations to create a false need of help for us. So we want to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the people and that our needs are secondary to that. And number 5, it is a game, not a game, but it is an art of listening and reading between the lines, and trying to figure out what people need, especially when they're not expressing it directly. That project opportunity that people aren't committing to, what's keeping them from your help? Okay, why isn't that project going anywhere? What's the deeper story? So we're constantly asking that question. And then number 6, above all, do no harm. We don't want to come and just add more burden, more of a mess, and more harm to these communities that we have the honor and the opportunity to work with. So good intentions don't eliminate the possibility of unintended consequences. Many times good intentions have very negative impacts, lasting impacts. So some insights for helping. We try to recognize that most causes of poverty end up creating material poverty as well. The focus on the root cause of the problem and not the symptom, material poverty, and then building relationships with the individual and the community and having those turn into long-term relationships is really important to us. And then focusing on development, not relief, and partnering with people who have the relationships in the communities already established. And then whenever possible, do with the community instead of doing for the community. So I hope that this helps you understand a little bit about our guiding principles and policies when we are setting up our outreach projects. We have a whole host of amazing missionaries and nonprofits and schools and medical organizations that we work with in Central America that we love very dearly because they are in there for the long haul. They are in there to change generations and to change the cyclical nature of poverty in many of these communities. And it is so inspiring for us, and it's a real honor for us to be involved. So if you want to learn more, hay muchas oportunidades para aprender más. Visit us on commongroundinternational.com. Muchísimas gracias, and send me an email, Leslie Foster, at commongroundinternational.com if you have any questions or want to discuss this more. Adios.